Hey, what's happening everybody? My name is John Denton. Thank you very much for joining me today on the channel, and it's an interesting one. This is a video that kind of ummed and ahed about putting out altogether, but I decided it's something that was really going around in my head as soon as I saw the discussion cropping up online, and it's something I wanted to talk about as well. So listen, I've got a giant cup of tea that may or may not have been taken from some sort of coffee company. You know, when the English guy's got a big cup of tea, we're going in. As the title of the video says, can white people relate to rap or hip-hop music? Now, I think it's very important to start with that I can only speak for myself. I can only speak for myself, and I'm going to talk about this in two parts, because initially the discussion was kicked off by the tweet from Noname. This was brought to my attention through an article from Uprocks that was actually shared by Noname. So I kind of found it in a strange sort of way. But obviously she's mainly talking about not wanting to perform anymore for white people. And it's quite a controversial thing to say, quite a controversial thing to wake up to on a Sunday morning as I saw it. And certainly, unsurprisingly, has kicked off a massive discussion, a massive debate, and as is the way with social media and the internet, a lot of arguing. Unfortunately, I'm not going to keep performing for predominantly white crowds. I have 2 shows on the books. I don't want to dance on stage for white people. That's the general crux of it. Me consistently creating content that is primarily consumed by a white audience who would rather shit on me and challenge their liberalism because somehow liking Lizzo's music absolves them of racist tendencies. And seemingly the crux of what she's saying is she's disappointed or uncomfortable with, I think uncomfortable is the word that I should use, about performing for a majority white audience at her shows, when potentially she would prefer her message intended, or her art is intended for a different audience, predominantly, a black American audience, and she's uncomfortable with that and doesn't want to do that anymore, and then goes into some other topics here, which I think, you can't ignore. When I go to work, thousands of white people scream the word at me. You can read it on the screen. And no, I'm not changing my art, so it is what it is. Catch me at Noname Books. And then again, what's funny is that most black artists are just as uncomfortable performing for majority white crowds, never publicly say so, out of fear and allegiance to money, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you've got to eat, but wouldn't be up in arms if I was quitting working at McDonald's. I think this is an interesting topic, obviously. It's a fascinating topic, and it's going to create a lot of debate. I think, first of all, what we have to say is that if that is how she feels in her heart, then you can't question that. You just have to understand the honesty. If she is uncomfortable going up on stage and performing under those circumstances, and especially with thousands of people, as she says, thousands of white people saying that word back to her, then that is absolutely her prerogative and right to feel like that. Now, where I think that she's made a mistake is that she's used the social platform Twitter to try and have any sort of discussion with any sort of nuance. Twitter is probably the worst platform in the history of human communication for nuance. Here is a platform where you can potentially speak to millions of people all at once, and you are limited by the amount of characters that you can use. Admittedly, it's doubled in the last few years, but still, you are limited by the amount of characters that you can use. Yes, you can create a thread, but they're individualized, and the single tweets can still go out to individual people. So, a massive problem for nuance straight away. Also, anybody who may reply, people are open to reply to that small amount of text. They are also limited, of course, by the same limitations. And furthermore, not only are there these strict limitations, plus the potential for a global audience, but the platform directly rewards controversy and controversial statements through likes and retweets, which is why we see this kind of polemic where people would rather jump in and say something controversial, because even though it might piss a certain amount of people off, I'm not saying this is what Noname did at all, by the way, but replies, topics about this, they will get that basic human reward of likes, and it gets into your dopamine systems, okay? Nobody's immune to it. Some people are more susceptible to it than others. So she's talking about an extremely complicated and nuanced subject in the worst platform possible. So that's a mistake straight away. I'm not saying she shouldn't have talked about it publicly, but even Instagram is better for this stuff because at least you can write paragraphs. So if you put yourself out there with a statement like that on that social platform, you have to know it's going to come back. And then the initial tweet that I saw was her saying that Uproxx needs to stop using her for content. But ultimately, if you're a person with influence and a person with a following, especially the person with a blue tick next to your name, statements that you put out like that are content. They just are. They're content directly, and then content will be created around them. That is the world that we live in. We can't be naive about that. So do I think Noname is a racist for saying this sort of stuff? No, and I don't know Noname, but I wouldn't say that these statements are necessarily racist statements. However, I will say that I am, as a person, fundamentally against any sort of racial segregation, whether positive or negative. Now, 99.999% of human history has been negative. But by simply separating people by colour, by race, even in this circumstance, you are just exacerbating segregation and division. And I'm firmly, as a person, fundamentally against that. This brings me on to a wider topic now. And it's something that I saw Shawn Cee talk about. And I know he's actually produced a video on this, and I started to watch it and actually stopped because I didn't want to get into the situation where I was mimicking his cadence or mimicking some of his ideas. I don't actually know what Shawn says in his video. I will go and watch it afterwards. But I saw this tweet and I saw a reply. Do you think white people understand rap music? If I were to ask you what you like so much about K-Dot, Pusha T, Freddie Gibbs, Benny the Butcher, outside of technical rap skill, what about their music do you, as a white fan, relate to? I think that's a perfectly reasonable question intended to spark debate on the worst platform in human history for nuance and communication. But he's since put out a video, so I don't want to assume anything that Shawn is thinking here. I'm going to take that as a question. And I think it's a good question. And I saw a good reply from Kodweka, which I'm sure I can find quite quickly. I think beyond issues like racial injustice that white people don't face, the stories these artists tell in their music connect more with what it means to be human, using their own experiences to reach all type of audiences who relate through their individual struggles. I think that's a good answer from a young man as well. So my take on that is complicated and nuanced, which is why I wanted to stick on a video and talk about it. So can white people, ultimately, the question this video raises in this video is can white people relate to rap and hip hop music, particularly American rap and hip hop music? Now I speak as somebody who, checking my skin, I'm pretty sure I'm white, even though I have a complex and kind of confusing history of my own ancestry. In fact, I don't know what a lot of it is, but at the same time, I'm also English, obviously, so I'm not in America. So that separates me twice, in fact, from some of this music, but also gives me an element of detachment to be able to kind of look from an outsider's point of view, particularly the American English thing. Now, I think it's very important before we go into this to understand and appreciate and have an understanding that there are certain things that I can only speak for myself, but there are certain things as somebody who is white and English cannot relate to in a specific sense. There is absolutely some things that I cannot possibly relate to in a specific sense. And as much as I understand certain traumatic elements, I can never truly understand because I can never truly relate to some of the subject matters in, say, Kendrick Lamar's music or countless other artists that have spoken about the history of slavery in America, or more specific, police brutality recently, or Jim Crow, or the countless things that the black American people, and I'm talking about black American people here because I'm talking about American hip-hop, have suffered. However, what I do believe, and I believe this at a fundamental level, is that how do we understand about other people as human beings? How do we relate to things? How do we try and gain a greater understanding of things? And it is always through stories. There's a reason why build-ups for fights, boxing and UFC, they tell the stories and the backstories because we as human beings relate to stories, and at a fundamental, like primal caveman level, we have been looking to other people for their reactions on their faces or how they react as a safety mechanism, just purely as a survivalism, and we've evolved so much beyond that to be able to relate and have empathy and compassion. So when I listen to a Black Other Berry, or and I'm going to go into a specific song actually from the UK in a minute, but when I listen to music like that, can I directly relate? Can I understand at the core of my being the collective trauma of the Black American experience, a generational trauma that I still don't think, I'm assuming, is so far away from being truly processed? Can I truly understand? How could I? How possibly could I? And you just have to accept that. However, can I gain a greater understanding? Can I gain way more compassion? Can I gain an appreciation when an amazing artist paints such vivid pictures with their words and music, as a Kendrick Lamar does, using him as a sort of a prime example, specifically the To Pimp a Butterfly album? Can I gain greater compassion and understanding, a greater sense of love, a greater sense of connection? Of course, because humans respond to stories. This is how we make sense of the world around us, through stories. So I think it would be entirely dismissive to think that white people, and I can only speak for myself because I don't want to speak for anybody else. I happen to be the same colour as plenty of people in America, but the experience of my life is extremely different. I'm also the same colour as plenty of people from Eastern Europe, and my experience of my life is completely different. So I think that's the fundamental thing. I think for everybody to know that compassion comes from listening to stories, and I don't think anybody, well, certainly myself, would ever think or assume or walk around with the arrogance to think that I can understand how it must feel to feel like Kendrick Lamar. But through his incredible artistry, I can feel it to a sense because of how vividly he portrays it. I think there's something to be said there. I haven't quite unpacked my entire way of thinking about that, but you can live in that kind of dichotomy of, I don't feel what you're saying because I don't feel it, because I can't feel it, because that hasn't happened to me, and generationally that hasn't happened to me. However, I'm a human being that can relate to all sorts of feelings and understand all sorts of feelings, and is complex and nuanced, one of the subject matters of the day. So of course, do I gain a great understanding? Do I grow as a human being massively from appreciating and diving into music like that? Of course I do, and I think that's what's so important. And I think ultimately this is how we connect as people across the sea, across racial divides, across gender divides, across everything, through great stories and through great art. So to finish off, I wanted to talk about a song that I think is an important song that came out this year in England, and it is Black by Dave. And that is a song which I believe has caused a genuine cultural shift in our country. It got a lot of mainstream radio play. It was played on almost every single show on Radio 1, which has millions of listeners in the UK. And so millions of people heard what is a very clear, concise piece of poetry. From my personal point of view, even though I believe it created a cultural shift in England and the UK, from my personal point of view, there were two lines that stood out in that song, and I'll bring them up now. Okay, so I'll go through the piece. I'll go through the part of the song that preceded it. The blackest people name your countries and what they trade most: Coast of Ivory, Gold Coast, and the Grain Coast. But most importantly, to show how deep all this pain goes, West Africa, Benin, they call it Slave Coast. I mean, it's an amazing few bars there, and I don't think that anybody with a single sense, an ounce of compassion in their body, whatever they come from, whatever race they might belong to, could hear that and not be struck by it. Okay, I think that's an extremely educational few bars for people that go along with their lives with no ill intent whatsoever. They go along with their lives with no ill intent whatsoever, and just don't realise some of this stuff. Perhaps they're younger. The education system in England is good, but at the same time, I've said this on social media, I was never told any of this stuff in history class. It didn't exist. But going on, black is so confusing because the culture, they're in love with it. They take our features when they want and have their fun with it. Now that's obviously, you can interpret that in different ways, but certainly some of the cosmetic side of things. But never seem to help with all the things we know would come with it. Loud in our laughter, silent in our suffering. Now when I heard that for the first time, it really struck me, because as somebody, I'm talking from a personal point of view now, somebody who obviously creates content around a lot of rap music, hip hop music, and black culture, I thought, am I complicit in that? And that's something that stuck with me a lot, and it's something that I think about a lot. And I think it's just a beautiful way of putting a question to, I mean, it's obviously there's fucking racist people out there, and he's not speaking to those people with those lines. He's speaking to the people that are fans of probably his and fans of UK rap music, all sorts of things, or indeed giving themselves different features, physical features. What are they actually thinking about? So that just really struck with me and stuck with me, and it's something that I think about a lot. And again, I can't know certain things, however, I can have as much compassion, and I just think so much of it is about listening to stories and understanding and trying to appreciate and just trying to connect. But here's the one that really hit me. There are so many powerful lines in this song. Black is stepping in for your mother because your father's gone. Okay, I mean, I know that's something in Dave's own life. And standing by your children when you haven't proven karma wrong. Black is doing all the above and going corner shop, trying to help a lady cross the road to have her walking off. I sat in my car. I heard this song for the first time in my car, driving back from dropping my kids off at school, and it came on the radio in a breakfast show. I parked up about halfway through the song, and that line hit. Black is doing all the above and going corner shop, trying to help a lady cross the road and have her walking off. That hit me like a fucking ton of bricks. Let me tell you, that line hit me like a ton of bricks, because I could just imagine a young kid or a young man or girl, woman, who's black, or indeed maybe even Asian, Indian, whatever. Just the innocence of a child going to try and help an old lady and have her walking off because she won't even accept help from somebody from a different race, different colour. And that is real, unfortunately, in our country. That is very, very, very real. And I hear things that just catch me by surprise from, people who I know, and then their relatives have said this. It blows my mind and it scares me. But the innocence of children, because I see it in my own children, and I see it in children, and I remember what I felt like as a child. They just don't see it. Race doesn't exist to children. It just doesn't. They don't see. They just don't see it. So I don't know if that's something that specifically happened to Dave. I get the impression it probably was. It fucking, honestly, mate, I'm not going to lie to you. I sat in my car, tears started coming down my face, and I just had to come in the house, go upstairs, lie on the bed, and it struck me for a good 5 or 10 minutes, because how awful for a child to have that fundament, to be treated like that, and then you can trace that through and all sorts of different things, but to a child, a child. So I thought that, I wanted to finish on that, because can a white person relate to rap and hip-hop music? I think I've seen there's a dichotomy there. There's a kind of duality in thinking there, because ultimately and fundamentally, in so many ways, no, because there are certain traumatic things that I cannot directly relate to. However, that never happened to me, okay? Of course not. But did it hit me in the core of my being? Of course it did. And because it was even in a concise way like that, I gained such compassion, understanding, appreciation, sorrow, introspectiveness from stories being told. And that is, I know it's helping me grow as a person. Not that I have any or had any racist tendencies anyway, but I know that for thousands and thousands of I can assume of people who are white as well. It hits them in the same way, because there's no way that people would be such fans of artists and love their artists so much without listening in that sort of way. And I think it's so important to not assume that a white section of an audience or a white section is just there to take and not to listen. And I would implore anybody, the most important thing to do in these fucking crazy times where we're not only divided both here and in the US, but the media and politics are doubling down. They know that they can create more for themselves by doubling down on that division. I think it's so important just to listen to the stories. If you're a white person hearing what Noname said, or a fan of Noname who happens to be white, at least try and come at it from an understanding, from a place of trying to understand, from a place of listening. And I think that not only do we then move away from this ridiculous reactionary culture, this knee-jerk culture, which stuff like Twitter, only helps to exacerbate and amplify, then we also just grow as people a little bit. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on the subject. I think it's a complicated subject. I'm going to go and watch Shawn's video now to see what he says. I think it's something that I'll continue to think about every day, and of course I will, just through the nature of what this is and what I do. And I just want to say thank you very much for watching and listening, really. This has gone on a lot longer than I thought it would, but there we go. Alright, thank you very much. I'm John Denton. I'll catch you on the next video.